Not me, yeah.
Musa Faki, who is the chair of our Africa Union Commission, can do very little because we have retained all the powers as heads of state.
Right.
And yet, you cannot run one country and run the continent of Africa. Right? We seriously need an interrogation of the management of the Africa Union. Today, we cannot even support Somalia. We are waiting for EU to give us $85 million. $85 million. You know, we cannot fund it as AU. It is stupid. I mean,
my brother,
it is madness. So are you telling me 54 countries, 60 years after independence, they cannot manage 85 million to sort out Somalia, which has no government? Eh?
Well, those sentiments were shared by President William Ruto during the Mo Ibrahim governance conversation that was held in Nairobi just this Sunday. And just to highlight the words he used, we have the wrong architecture in the management of the African Union. The AU Commission chairman can do very little because we have retained all the powers as heads of state, and yet you cannot run one country and run the continent of Africa. We seriously need an interrogation on the management of the AU. Today we can't even support Somalia. We're waiting for the EU to give us $85 million. It is madness. Are you telling me 54 countries, 60 years after independence, cannot manage 85 million to support Somalia? An interesting point raised right there by President William Ruto, definitely poking holes into the management as it is of the African Union, an organization that is domiciled in Addis Ababa. Hashi told us it was built by the Chinese. So perhaps let's start with Hashi, briefly.
You know, the president fancies himself as a philosopher as well as being a president. He's also called Dr. William Ruto. He's got a doctorate in zoology. And he has come to my department of political economy. And I want to challenge his views on that. And I want to say that I agree, actually. I am actually impressed. I'm a strong critic of the president, as you know, and his government.
Sure.
And that's part of our democratic system.
As you mentioned.
But on this point, I think that the president, I want to say that I think he's done a fabulous job on this issue of the African Union. He's absolutely right. I've said on this program many moons ago that the African Union, English is my third language or my second language for all of us. And, there's a saying in it that says, when he walks like a duck and he talks like a duck, it is a duck. The African Union needs a complete transformation. What does it need? It needs three things in my view. Number one, I agree with President Ruto, and I said this on this program, when we're going to go, Africa cannot go and meet Japan. Japan is the size of Nairobi County. We can't go and meet a small group of people, even though they have a huge economy. This is the oldest continent on earth where civilization rose, where the first human being came from. Everybody else in the world is an expression of the African genetics. So we need to send whoever is the chair of the African Union to this meeting with 54 files of what the particular countries need. No, 54, maybe 5. West Africa, North Africa, Great Lakes, South Africa, and East Africa. That's it. We don't need to have 54 heads of state having dinner at the White House. Mr. Ruto is right on this. I agree with him 100%. It's embarrassing. Where he is wrong, in my view, is on the issue of the economy and on climate. We don't need money from Western Union as guilty money for the climate change. We don't need it. We don't need to be given a check. He specifically said that. We should get a check. I don't want your check. I want to make my own check. What we want is to transform our economy regionally. I'll give you an example, because grand theories are a bit complicated. When I was going to school outside this country, specifically in Canada, they the Canadian government let in a very cheap car by Hyundai. It was worth it was 10,000, 9,000, 10,000. Very cheap. And all of our students went to go and buy these cheap Hyundais. And after a while, Hyundai has now become one of the biggest car exporters in the world. Why did they allow South Korea to send cars to North America and Europe? It is because of the political situation between South Korea and North Korea.
Yes.
They wanted to prop up South Korea, make it into a capitalist country, show that it could become progressive, and have a market economy. And for them to get ahead, they sold their products to North America, which was very protectionist. They did the same with Singapore. They did the same with Malaysia. They did the same with Japan. If you look at all the countries that are developed in the Asia Pacific, they were right at the front of the mouth of the Soviet Union and Red China. And if you go through the charts of import-export of these countries exporting to the United States, you'll be shocked. Now, should we run the model of export-based driven economy? We should be making our own Hyundais for Tanzania, for the DRC, for Sudan. We should be making our own shoes. We should be making our own fabrics. We should be creating industries that will make us trade among each other. That is where we should go. That's where we should go. And if we go with our bucket to tell the Americans and the Europeans, oh, give us a check. A check is not going to help us because we would not go through the struggle of creating our own economy and standing on our own feet and having the pride of doing something for ourselves. So we have to extinguish. President Museveni is right in getting the refinery in Uganda. What is he supposed to do? Wait for some too-goody liberal bleeding heart from Germany to come here and tell us, oh, the world is going to go to hell on a bread basket, don't put out fossil fuels? No, this is a form of neo-imperialism, and we ought to reject that. I am, Rogers, I'm a family man, simple Kenyan. We Kenyans are conservative, but I'm conscious because of our condition. We don't have money in this country, we don't have jobs in this country, we don't have the infrastructure we need, we don't have the schools we have, because we can't fund it. That's why we're borrowing. So we have to stop and think about what to do with our economy. Lastly, let me put to you, the late Honorable Robert Nesta Marley, one of the great philosophers from the Caribbean. He's also a reggae artist. But he was first and foremost a philosopher. And he's got this song called Africa Unite. And just that we have this project of us uniting is the sine qua non. It is the philosophy of Africa. If we don't hold our hands together and put our resources together and find a leadership that can move us to Kwame Nkrumah's dream, we will fail. We will fail, and we must hold on to that dream because the rest of the world, the Rogers, want to come and settle here again. They want to come and send their people here again because they believe Africa is empty. We're not empty. We have 2 billion people. And it's going to grow to 3 billion people. The largest population of people under 25 are going to be from Africa. Okay? So we have to deal with these fundamental issues, and we need thinkers to come out and say those things about this continent.
Interesting, Prof.
Jesse, I completely agree with my friend, and here's the point. For many years, the American aid, what's called U.S. aid, was linked directly to the American interest. They give you aid on one hand. On the other hand, they have all the American workers who are involved directly in managing those aid. And so the money flow back into the United States. China is doing a lot of construction in Africa. Our infrastructure development, massive. But Chinese quietly negotiated in a way that all the materials, almost including cement or what have you, is all coming from China. That's the discussion I had yesterday with the Chinese contract. So all the houses that you see going up in Kilimani, Lavington and all that, all materials are from China. So money flow back to China, not to Kenya, not to Africa, to develop this country. And we have a policy. Ethiopia has a very tough policy, such that their people are able to control what flow back into China. And therefore, Africa reawake. Because what Hassi is talking about, our institutions are weak. And then we are not, we don't prioritize our sense of institution. I've been sitting on Inter-University Council of East Africa, which perhaps one of the oldest organ in the East Africa. Countries are not paying their dues. Yet they expect when scholarships and all that what about my country? What about my country? But they're not paying their basic dues for Inter-University Council in order to pay the secretariat. The same with the AU.
AU as well. It actually came up during that summit.
There is no question. If the building is built by Chinese, you tell me Africa cannot build that building.
It's pathetic.
And so you know, Ngugi wa Thiong'o said it correctly. Decolonize our mind so that we can be masters of our continent, of our situation. We need to rethink. We need to realign. And in our relationship with Chinese, it has to benefit Africa. In our relationship with the US, it has to benefit Africa. In our relationship with Russia, it has to benefit Africa. But we're structurally committed to do that. We cannot repeat the same mistake we already repeat, because everybody is coming here and everybody is going to take goods and services out of Africa.
So, Prof, from where you sit, before we cross over to Muliro, the greatest inhibitor to African unity, does it lie within the continent or outside? Prof.
Oh, Prof.
Just briefly, from where, before we cross over, same question.
You know, the book, again, I want everybody to read this book. Ngugi wa Thiong'o has written many books. But I think one of his classic books, which I make sure all my students read all the time, is Decolonizing the Mind. Chunwa Chebe talk about things fall apart. But so we represent the French people. Not too long ago, we had an Attorney General here who think like a British and behave like one and eat like one. You hear?
And married like one.
Well, you're going to fight.
I'm personal now. Anyway.
I say it's going to fight. This is happening in almost all Francophone countries.
Okay.
There was a president who went to celebrate his birthday in Paris. And the people tore the cake and everything.
True.
Yeah, can you do it in your own country? Can you be responsible? So it is what's it called, mindset. Like South Korean. It is mindset. We need to mindset Africa like South Koreans did.
Okay.
South Korea said their country had nothing, no resources, no everything. Middle East have all the oil. So South Korea figured out what we can do is develop giant refinery project in South Korea. We bring oil, crude oil from the Middle East, and we sell them back. Refined oil.
Okay.
That's how it became rich. Okay. And this was supported by the Americans, manufacturers and everything, all set here. We need those manufacturers here in Nairobi. We need the American corporate here in Nairobi, believing in us and working with us to transform this country.
As simple as that.
Yes.
So, and I was listening to that particular summit, the Mo Ibrahim Governance Summit, and as Prof has mentioned, Faki was put to question to answer how many countries have actually contributed as members of the AU. He tried to sound politically correct, saying most countries. He didn't want to name, name any names, but he said most countries haven't prescribed and given the money that is needed. So is it a big man syndrome that is perhaps bringing the AU to its knees? Because according to President William Ruto, I mean, it was unfortunate that African leaders were bundled into buses, yet we would have sent a representative, as Hashi mentioned. Talk to us about the AU as well, briefly.
Very good, thank you. That is an area I like. They have given that, in fact, I thought you were talking about Bob Marley as a philosopher. He was Africa Unite, but there is also the serious one, emancipate yourself from mental slavery, and is what he is talking about. But then, I think what the president is, as he says, is the new kid in this entrenched system. And he might be seeing things from, the perspective of a new employee who comes in and must reform the system. And I would say this, that, the formation history of the AU itself, as Kwame Nkrumah said, seek the political kingdom first, and the rest will come. But there are those who are saying that we seek the economic kingdom first, and that what now went back to the regional economic communities like EAC and the rest. But the architecture of the African Union is political influence. You see that? That is more about, is about gaining forum for African Pan-Africanism to push their influence to speak in the international system. The AU does not have economic muscle to make its members feel beholden to it. And that's why you find that African states are up to date with international organizations and institutions. They subscribe to those international UN, member of World Trade Organization, but you ask them why not at home? Because it doesn't affect them. They see it as a forum where we meet, talk, agree on something, project our voice, as a political movement. But that is wrong, in the sense that that's forum, again, you are leaving the economic muscle to the external world. And whoever pays the piper is the one who calls the tune, isn't it? Yeah. So the economic sector or economic muscle of the AU is in the hands of the Western powers. They're the ones who finance, as he says, China came in. It's even good that we should have just stuck with that small office. It was very modest, built by Gaddafi. So we bring the Chinese so that the best way to have Africa begin from the capital city of African politics, Addis, build something there. We are told many things around that. And you can remember for the first time, the Americans have been keeping off. They don't refer to African Union. But for the first time when Obama came around, he addresses the first American president to address from that place that the Chinese did. So the AU is actually, African leaders themselves have made it become a forum for balance of power, political influence, but not economic, infrastructural, and other issues that affect the small people. And therefore, the world have seen that we can use the economic arm, but then play politics within the AU. And so when you look at this, the one we are saying that we emancipate ourselves, I'm sure it's only that President Ruto has come out and spoken. All of them know it. In their minds, they know how it is manipulated. In their minds, the African leaders, save for few who are very old, maybe we can talk of the Ngwema and the Cameroon and the rest, but these young leaders that have been coming in, look at Tanzania, very aware of the global dynamics, but the issue is, where is the economic muscle of this continent? And how do we, they have told us, Hashi, they told us, yes, we know you have resources, which is true, we have them. But the question has been, they have told us, you have the resources, but we are the only people who can make your resources sit on the shelves. of the market, isn't it? We have them, but who can put them on the shelves? So we must find a way in which, as they say, actually the reality is that the panic, Jesse, don't, as young people, don't feel that the end is very dark for Africa. Actually, we've moved. There is a level of progress, and even when the president speaks like that, there is that level. But we must have this awareness that we have the strength, and this strength is our enemy, in the sense that the process of having our leaders, most of them, maybe more than a half, are in position because the global powers put them there. We know very well that all our first statesmen, all our leaders, as we say that we fought for independence, all of them were put there by the groups that were leaving. I'm leaving Kenya, I put there my person. So those people still know the reality, but when they are told, we put you there or we will change you, then you say the AU must remain the way it is. Okay. Very good.
Well, as we finalize, because we need to shift focus to DRC.
The great Martin Luther King Jr. was in jail, the father of the civil rights movement and strong supporter of Pan-Africanism, was in jail in Birmingham, Alabama. Said that we will not remember the words of our enemies, but we'll remember the silence of our friends. What is happening is the silence of the lambs about Sudan. If we are silent about Sudan, we will be silent about Chad tomorrow. Will we be silent about Mali? Will God forbid, we'll be silent about Senegal? The demonstrations in the city over the president there trying to look for a third term. We have in this continent have to come to terms that the civilian authority must be elected. It cannot be elected through the Electoral Commission. You know, now since the great fall of the Berlin Wall, the African leaders have figured out Stalin's dictum. It doesn't matter who votes. It is who counts the vote that matters. It is a bamboozling, toppling of the popular will of the people of this continent. People of this continent can make cars, they can make factories, they can build buildings, they have the same brains as everybody else in the world, but they don't have the institutions and the leadership to make it so. And that is why I'm very gung-ho about transformation in our societies. And the Mo Ibrahim Foundation, Mo Ibrahim may be a billionaire in the industry, but he's not a billionaire in the political economics and the ideas of government. He may contribute to it, and we laud it. The president of this country is as good as the minds that he has around him. He's as good as that. No president is any good without the minds out of it. John Kennedy is a testament to that. So, Rogers, at the end of the day, our judicial system cannot release a man who killed 9 children and put them in graves. That man should have been arrested under terrorism law. And in fact, it's the military who should have put him in a tribunal and throw the key where he was. You know, we have to be decisive about these things. Because this man is a threat to our national security. Yes. He is a threat. Just like a terrorist from Mogadishu who crosses into Lami and goes and shoots soldiers. This man is worse. He's worse because those people at least know the enemy is there shooting. This guy was death by 1,000 cuts. So the judge, and I want to tell the president, the judge who set that man free, they themselves are a threat to national security. And the president has to speak about it, the National Assembly has to speak about it. They killed 9 children and they set that man free. There's law no on earth that is not going to convict that man. And any legal niceties to let a monster like that into our community to go and kill more children is a thwarting of the law. It is the toppling of the law in this country. I put it to you,
okay.
Rogers.
It's also proper to note he was rearrested, just for viewers' knowledge as well. But he raises a critical question. Gentlemen, I'd like us to talk about the East African Community Regional Force. And we well know of Kenya's presence in the Democratic Republic of Congo. But the most interesting development recently, Major General Jeff Mungai Nyaga had a controversial exit. According to internal sources, he refused to retake his position, citing humiliation. But equally, the East African highlights a line that I'd like to read out loud right now before Prof comes into it. It says, Nyaga had indicated he was quitting after a threat to his security. Mercenaries placed monitoring devices, surveillance in his residence in early January, forcing him to relocate. It was unclear who the foreign military contractors were. And when a team of journalists toured the operation areas just last week, they were visible patrolling the area in their pickups. Of course, Washington has pointed a blaming finger to the Wagner Group, whichever way you pronounce it. But the big question here, Prof, even as you reflect on the controversial exit, the mandate of the EACRF is actually expired. It did on, is it March 30th, following a lapse of that initial 6 months. And up to date, we don't know if it will be renewed because it seems to be pegged on the assessment of the force's achievements. So let's start from that point. Were we able to achieve what we went into DRC to actually do?
The JC, you know, they're different interpretation. But let me get back to General Nyaga himself.
Yeah.
General Nyaga is a distinguished a military leader, highly decorated, highly respectable. That's the reason he was sent to head the African team. The African team that went there were not supposed to be shooting. That was not their mission. Their mission was to bring the conflicting groups, okay, disarm them diplomatically, disarm them so that the government can move in and establish institution. There's no institution in that area that is functional. And so they are bandits of all the foreigners. Everybody is there, from Israel to Irgun, in that all region. Now, so the issue is, did he fail, he didn't fail? That's not rise. Because they were not going there with military to disarm those people and say we have disarmed them, so now we can. That was not the mission.
Yeah.
And therefore, when Wagner and all the rest have anchored down with incredible military base, it is very, very difficult. So did the African envision and send the right team with the right purpose? I don't think so. This area requires a formidable force. That's number one, and diplomats behind that force. Formidable force to dislodge the foreign forces and foreign interest in the area and allow the government of Congo to move in and establish. The government of Congo anticipates, and the people of Congo, a military contingency which is given power to shoot their way in. Okay? So if you look at it from the ordinary Congolese, yes, they fall. They did not achieve what they are. But if you look at rationally why they went there, he achieved his objective. And then his life is threatened and everybody else. What else can you expect of it? And therefore, it comes back to the whole issue that we've been talking about. Africans must be serious about this issue about institutional framework, government, governance. We must be serious about building our institution. AU to East Africa community must be credible. And they can only be credible when the person on the street feels that something substantial is being happened to make our life better.
Okay, and we were speaking of the CAF, Muliro, in terms of how expansive DRC is, and it, due to its expansive nature, it definitely attracts the interest of, regional players, international partners, and whatnot. So looking at the protracted issues within the DRC, the M23, I mean, you could equally give us a historical perspective. So we come to the general outcome of how perhaps you can get out of this quagmire that we find ourselves in.
That's very, it's a bit full, but then just to pick from where Prof stopped, you know, the DRC, the way we are saying, is it's like the path that the actors are following in Sudan was tested in DRC. You know, expansive, huge states means more neighbors, means more international relations, interactions, and therefore very prominent regionally and internationally, the interests. And so, as you say, you are right. DRC has, in fact, 3 layers of assessment. If you were to do a conflict sensitivity assessment, then you'll see that there is the extra Africa, which is entrenched. You know, DRC has one of the longest UN peacekeeping mission. And we question ourselves. You remember when there were elections and the Kabila felt like he had actually restored civil governance that my brother here sings very well, which is right, is that he said, he requested something that has never happened. He asked the UN that now you can leave, we'll be able to manage our affairs. But what was the answer? For the first time, you know, an organization, an intergovernmental organization is subservient to individual states that make it. So it doesn't even enjoy that sovereignty above the states, but they told DRC, the government, that we shall live when we assess, we are fully satisfied that it is the right time for us to live. And remember, they came in by virtue that they were invited by the state. That's the process in that case. So you'll see those are extra Africa interests, the resources and the rest, which is known. A lot of work has been written about that, Jesse, the global interest in DRC. And then we have the regional interests emerged, which now sort of complicated the recent explosion. In fact, you know, if you as they say, you know, in DRC, a few cases of research there, you'll find that, as they say, very expensive and movement by air is easier than by road. But you'll find that, as they say, private ownership, very linked from the government, no government control. You know, small companies with airstrips run by international organizations or regional states. So the regional layer became the problem. In particular, the cross-border movement of these rebel groups, M23. So that is Rwanda. So you find Rwanda, you find Uganda is also fighting its own rebels that run across the borders. And you find Burundi is doing that. You find Angola has been there for a long time. In the same region there. So that is the regional dynamic that brought in the EAC. So immediately DRC was admitted to EAC. Then we found the moral standing to say that we can enter there. And we were doing the guinea pig security perspective of EAC. EAC is more economic, regional economic community. So then you're bound to have these challenges. And I agree that actually we cannot, unless it is an international media campaign, the East Africa regional force made a mark. It's not just a long shot in the dark. They made a mark in the sense that, as he says, they were running on 2 rails, military diplomacy and political diplomacy. And remember that the military diplomacy driven by the fact that there is that, in quotes, militarization of politics and leadership in DRC, just like Sudan, the respect of the generals and the rest there. And the feeling of the people is always that when we see jungle, fatigue and the rest, we will always feel that there is a buffer zone. And it happened. It was running concurrent with President Uhuru's program, which is a political arm. And you know the agreement, the status of the forces agreement that was there is that General Nyaga could not do anything above his own bosses. They met here in Nairobi and met again, I think the Rwanda process is running on its own. They met again, I think in Burundi. And the insistence was, we will not shoot. It will be the last resort. We are there as a buffer zone. So this idea that you saw, and it was working because the M23 for the first time realized that they were recognized and they were looking for an exit strategy. And the idea was, now we can go we can be at the table. And they started withdrawing voluntarily without blood. And that was very good for the first time. EAC is an achievement. But then complications came in. External and internal, the internal layer, the three layers I told you, extra-Africa, regional, and internal. We are looking at the elections possibly in December. And Tshisekedi has embedded his election aspirations through the peace process and is complicating everything. Remember that Rwanda and Uganda have single-handedly for a long time been selecting who leads DRC. They choose, including Kabila himself. And now he's fallen up. I can give you the story of the one they called, you know, this writer was called Kisangani, I think. He called it the World War of Africa, which was true. Because even the World War should be called, Hashi, I'm now with you, a Pan-African. World War should be called the World War of Europe. It's not the World War of the world. Many parts of the world were not, of Europe. So he wrote about the World War of Africa, the First and Second War, Congo War, where over 10 states were involved. So we are seeing that there in that case. So Rwanda and Uganda, now that there is friction between them and Tshisekedi is looking at his re-election. And that is why he's saying this Rwanda-linked M23 should be killed, you know, they should be destroyed. They should not be recognized and allowed at the table of decent diplomacy. You look at that there. Because you allow them, the Kivu region there, if you allow them again to vote, the voting there is dictated by the ethnic groups in Rwanda. So if you are not at peace with them, then you lose elections in that case. So that is the dynamic that affects the DRC, the three layers. And I can tell you that what Major General Nyaga was saying, that drones, you know, he's a diplomat and as a military person, you don't dip your hand into and stir the diplomatic aspects. It's a very delicate issue, the DRC issue about EAC, because still they want to allow Congo to be giving their own perspective. You see how meetings come and he dictates them, and even there was a meeting where President Ruto was there and they directly told him, we hoped that you are coming to kill and destroy, vanquish M23, not to talk to them. They are terrorists, don't recognize them, don't give them status. So he said there were drones from Wagner or the rest hovering around his residence and he had to shift to another one. But there was also a catch that a very strong media campaign had been started. If you look at what was being shown, the demonstrations against East Africa regional force, the one against MONUSCO looked, you know, very real, and it has been there for a long time, and the government was actually strongly dispersing them. But then the one against EAC looked very, you know, really the messaging was also very well trained. Those people who are being interviewed. And so it showed that the people do not want ESRF, and therefore you should leave. Okay, good.
Great Shaban Roberts used to say, watu wanaweza ila la upuzi. Kiswahili is the major language in our region. We should quote Shaban Roberts regularly as a guru. Now, what's happening over there in the DRC is upuzi. And why is it upuzi? Because you know, they decided that the short people and the tall people are going to fight. The tall people are my descendants from the 15th century when the Ajuran Sultanate was broken here in Mogadishu. We went into 4 directions. We gave birth to people like Museveni there, the Ankolas, right down southern, all the way down to Kagame, all the way to eastern DRC. The problem with the DRC is not a problem of ethnicity. It's not a problem of the state. It's not a problem of the market. It's not a problem of religion. It is the whole problem of the colonization of the Congo by Belgium and France. You know, people talk about the 6 million Jews who died in the Second World War, probably the most atrocious Holocaust on earth. In the Congo, it was 10 million. Millions more had their hands chopped up. The trauma of that Holocaust is still with us in the DRC. I put it to you that the leadership that is required to transform the DRC and the Great Lakes region is the leadership of Patrice Lumumba, who was killed, you know, because of his struggle for the emancipation of the people of the Congo. Recently, they sent back his tooth. That was the remains of the great patriot of this continent. Now, we have to put it to the public discourse, and well, we have to put it well in the public discourse, that this problem of Banyamulinge, the problem of Rwanda, and the problem of the DRC is very simple. The people of Eastern Congo are citizens of the DRC. Those who committed the genocide in Rwanda and escaped to the DRC must face the justice of the Rwandese judicial system. Yeah? Those who are exporting DRC's resources through Uganda and Rwanda must stop and pay reparations back to the DRC. These truths are self-evident, but nobody wants to take a look at the evidence. All they want to do is to play the game of subterfuge, which makes Africa and the region open to these incursions by the international financial system into making our economy in the DRC wholly owned by the Americans and the Chinese and other interests, and not wholly owned by Africans. So Kenya is doing the right thing by sending its troops there, because we know if the DRC breaks up again, there could be another genocide. You know, this idea that we are not part of the human condition, that Africans cannot commit a form of barbarism, is nonsense. When the conditions are there, any human being will commit this barbarism. But the rest of the world has committed so much barbarism in our continent that we ought to stop doing our own barbarism. I put it to you, Rogers, that the institutions of the African Union are very important. The institutions of the IGAD, the Great Lakes, are very important. Yeah. And the institution of a new leadership that emerges out of our society and tells us that we're going to change the material world of our society. We're going to change the spiritual situation of our society. And we're going to reassert the old African values that we've always had, in which even the Bible has borrowed, is love thy neighbor.
Okay, gentlemen, our time is almost up, so I don't know, any burning issue?
No,
as we finalize, I think...
Okay, I just want to say one last thing before we go.
Briefly.
I think that the president said that the Somalia doesn't have a government. You know, last time I was in Eldoret, I went to Wagon Wheel, and there was, you know, the steeplechase, the 10,000 steeplechase. So the first two were from Uganda. They were called Kipkorir and Chariot. The third guy was called Kipkemboi. He was from Kenya. And I saw all the Kalenjins clapping very hard for the Ugandan Kalenjins. You know, they're the same people. And I was clapping for the Kenyan one. I was trying to tell the Kenyan one, pass these two Ugandans. Now, I want to tell in the same vein, and you know, this is done with a light tone, that, you know, I happen to be a Somali as well. And I'm a bit pissed off that the president said that Somalia doesn't have a government. So please, Mr. Ruto, call Mr. Hassan Sheikh and tell him I'm very sorry about that, because the Somali community is upset here in Kenya. We want there to be a government in Somalia. I know it's not functioning. Remember the Somali Republic, the soldiers, the Somali boys fought in South Sudan, fought in South Africa, Namibia, Mozambique, Angola. Their troops were fighting for African liberation all over Southern Africa. They helped KANU by giving them 20,000 pounds during independence era. We must help Somalia get a government and not tell them that they don't have a government. That's I oppose that.
Okay.
The strongest.
Briefly, a minute each.
Jesse, the Vol government was the most innovative, the most creative development in Kenya. We need to reinforce the principle of the Vol government. We need to respect the institution of the Vol government so that we can develop and remove chokehold on the city of Nairobi, so that development, employment, opportunity, healthcare need to move to the devolved government.
Well said. So briefly.
Just one word that I think Kenya should see the Sudan crisis as an opportunity to gain regional leadership. And I think by even continuously talking about it, and I think the president is almost trying to do that. At every opportunity, he mentions something, gives statements. We need that regional leadership. Through our peace diplomacy, we need to go back to the era of Lazarus Mbewa, Kalonzo Musyoka, all those special envoys that put Kenya on the world map. Thank you.
Well noted. Gentlemen, it's been a fruitful discussion. Asanteni sana. It's been 3 hours, imagine how time flies.
Thank you,
Having fun. Asanteni sana, Ahmed Ashi, governance expert, Prof. Noah Midamba, foreign policy expert, Asante sana, Wilfred Muliro, who in extension is an international relations expert. It's a pleasure to have you with us. Equally appreciating Professor Macharia Munene, who made time to join us via way of phone to highlight a couple of issues touching on Sudan. Everyone mentioned a proverb, an African quote. I'll finish with one. Only a fool tests the depth of a river with both feet. My name is Jesse Rogers. Good morning. Enjoy the rest of your viewing.